Hey guys, I'm Mishy Wingtips, and I'm going to teach you how to create realistic looking wrinkles in Photoshop. I'll be primarily using the dodge and the burn tool, and we're going to start with the burn tool. So the burn tool should be on your toolbar somewhere beneath the paint bucket tool, and it looks like a hand. And what the burn tool does is it darkens whatever color you have currently. So make sure you don't have any parts of your image, any select parts of your image selected. And make sure that you've got your clothing layer on a separate layer from your template layer, the usual. And then get a hold of your burn tool here and make sure to choose a soft brush, which will give you a much more realistic looking flow. And I'm going to be using a 13 pixel brush right now. That's a reasonable size. And right here next to this drop down menu up on top, it says range. This is telling you the various intensity levels of your darkening, because the burn tool darkens. So if you want to select shadows, that's going to raise the saturation while you're using it by a lot. Midtones is going to raise your saturation a little bit and is basically going to be between shadows and highlights, which doesn't up your saturation at all, it just darkens. So I'm going to use midtones since that's the most realistic looking, and I like to lower the opacity of my clothing layer so I can see where on the template I'm making these wrinkles. So if I want to put some wrinkles up on the chest area or coming from the armpit area, I'm going to just drag in the basic lines, and they can be pretty crude because we're going to straighten them out later. And then put your opacity or fill up back to 100. So then you see you've got your lines, and they look pretty unrealistic right now. But what you want to do after you've got your basic lines in is accentuate the middle of each line a little bit, because in realistic wrinkles, the middle of them is where it's usually deeper. So once you've done that, you have some lines with a darker inside. Then what you want to do is move on to the dodge tool. The dodge tool does the opposite of the burn tool. It lightens. So I want to choose something a little smaller, so a 9 pixel brush. And I want to choose midtones here as well. As you can imagine, shadows does not raise the opacity, highlights does, and midtones is halfway between. And you want your exposure to be pretty low. Make sure to play around with the exposure levels, because you don't want it to be super bright or very faint. So I'm going to go for, 37 exposure. So then what you want to do is go right on top of your dark lines on each one. Don't make it as long as your dark lines. Okay, it still doesn't look very realistic, right? Well, what you want to do now is select the smudge tool. You might be seeing it on your toolbar as the blur tool or the sharpen tool. So just click the little arrow in the corner of the icon until you can select the smudge tool. The smudge tool is pretty self-explanatory. It smudges any lines you make. And you don't want the strength to be 100 because you just want to basically smooth out these lines a little bit. So lower the strength down to maybe 46 or even lower. And then choose a brush bigger than your lines but not too huge. So maybe a 21. Then what you want to do is just drag out the edges of the wrinkles a little. And then this way, can you see this? It's how it's smoothing out the lines. This way these lines become much smoother and more natural. There you go. Now you have some wrinkles on here which look pretty realistic, but obviously not nearly as realistic as they could, since I haven't actually shaded this template at all. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to use the burn and dodge tool to shade.